I want to talk about the term what Dr. Woodcock is meaning, and Dr. Woodcock, you can certainly chime in on the comments on this, but I want to talk about what he is meaning in the term alien and the term posthuman. Okay, and then that's open for discussion. But first of all, I had a email interchange with Dr. Woodcock today, and he confirmed to me that he was primarily writing for a Jungian audience. And by a Jungian audience, he means an audience of Jungian analysts as opposed to you and me. And so when he's talking about the term alien, he's not talking about little green men. He is talking about a term that in other contexts has been referred to as the other, and in Jungian context is referred to as the self or the God image. And so we'll go back to Dr. Edinger's definition of this, which is a diagram of the first 4 chapters of Aion. And Jungian psychology is the only psychology that is based on 2 centers. One center is the ego, and the other center is the self, which is referred to sometimes as the God image, which cannot be differentiated from the metaphysical God, according to Dr. Jung. And so when he is referring to the alien, and when other Jungian psychologists in this book, when they are in this book, the Redbook for Our Time, when they are talking about the guest, they are talking, in my opinion, about what Dr. Jung referred to as the self. I don't think we're benefited by all these different terms for the same thing. All right. Having said that, let me add the term posthuman. The way I read this is that posthuman means that we are no longer in our animal persona, let's say. That human beings are evolutionarily animals, okay? But at some point, some of us have the ability to communicate with the self, which is the God image. And if you have the ability to communicate with the self, you are no longer an evolutionary being in the sense of, are you an amoeba, or are you a trilobite, or are you a alligator, or are you something else that crawled out of the depths, or are you a little furry creature that survived at the time of the dinosaurs? All of us have grandparents that go back to single-celled organisms, honestly, if you think about it. And so all of those creatures were stuck in the physicality, the somatic self of being an animal, okay? But once you get to the point where you can communicate with something that is more powerful than you, then you're communicating with the God image, and that may be posthuman. In other words, if you can communicate with the self, then you're no longer an evolutionary human being, then you are a some other being, a being that can communicate with the alien, the other, the self, the God image, whatever it is, you can communicate with a transcendent being. Okay.
So Jesus was post-human?
Yes.
So everybody that's so everybody who can has a relationship to their self is post-human.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't that just be human? I mean, that's what they've been doing since beginning of time. There's always been, there's always been a post-human, or we could have called him the witch doctor, or the witch,
Yeah.
or something.
But we didn't realize it back then. That's
we
that's the point, because
Well, that's why.
no, wait a minute. Human beings differentiated themselves. Human beings as creatures differentiated themselves at the time that Neanderthals died out. Per se, Neanderthals per se died out. We mated with them, and therefore they is us, right? We know where they went. They're us, right? Right. Okay. So then we became human beings from an evolutionary standpoint, but that was probably 30,000 years before even, I don't know who, Moses, Adam, whoever it is.
Well, given that logic, it just seems that human is. First of all, it seems like a human is just someone who has no consciousness. But on the other hand, if a person has no consciousness, they're living the God image, so they're actually more post-human than we are, because their conversation is direct and immediate. There's no intermediary. I don't think that's what Woodcock was meant by post-human, though.
Okay, what did he mean?
Well, I already said it. I mean, I think it has to do the idea that we are changed by technology. It's created a new language, and we have immersed ourselves in that language, and thereby we are no longer, our, as he says at one point, the telos of the psyche is going to be found in that language, and that telos has changed. The goal of the psyche has changed because the language has been abducted by aliens, and it's now driven by this immersion in the machine technologies. So being post-human means that you're not referring back to the God image, as you call it, or that it means that you have been sort of abducted by the technology itself. And that's how you're going to see the world, in terms of the technology, not necessarily in terms of your inner telos, your psyche, your relationship to the self. The ego-self axis has been severed, it sounds like. I still think post-human has to do with the technology, whether I get that right or not.
Well, that may or may not be Dr. Woodcock's intention. I don't pretend to understand that fully. Okay, but I think Dr. Jung's position was that the spirit per se has an objective, a telos, if you will. And that telos is being hammered away at it, in the sense that Michelangelo hammered away at the statue of David. That objective is being perfected by human beings all over the world forever, and it still is being perfected. And the technology is only a tool for that spirit being realized. And
So we're headed for us. You're saying that we're moving towards a sort of perfected spirit, which sounds pretty masculine.
I'm not saying that I don't know where we're headed, and I don't think Dr. Jung knew where we were headed, and I don't think anybody else knows where the spirit is
So
taking
what are we?
us.
What are this? We're carving away at this statue of David. What are we? What does that mean? I mean,
Well, it means, I would think it means something like the individuation of the human species itself. Okay.
so you're looking at species-wide spirit.
Yeah. Okay. Because basically, Dr. Edinger said we're either going to be all one thing, or we're going to be destroyed. We will destroy ourselves. And the more you see the banging back and forth between the extremes of the opposites as they've been put together in quote-unquote postmodern times. Now, mind you, before I read this book, I never focused on the term postmodern. So that's a totally academic word as far as I'm concerned. But having read the book, I understand the word postmodern means the fact that, oh, by the way, Germany is being filled up with people from Turkey and from Venezuela and so on, and that our cultures are all full of holes and that we have to change. Okay, and we are changing because all of our cultures are full of holes. And so we are changing, and technology is doing that to us. Okay, technology is causing us to change much faster than human beings have ever changed before, because now we have access to ideas that are from everywhere instead of the ideas that have been believed by our parents and grandparents all the way back to the amoebas. Now, all of a sudden, Christianity is confronted with Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and so forth. And we have to somehow come to grips with what those things mean to us, because they mean something to us, whatever it is. I don't know what it is yet, okay? But nonetheless, the fact that the internet has been opened up, yes, is a technological innovation, but it is, I don't think it's the end-all, be-all by any means, and it's only a tool by which the spirit can more quickly realize its goal, in Dr. Jung's sense, in my belief, okay, in my understanding. No comment. Total bullshit.
Well, I get where you're coming from. I just I'd need to think about it a bit. I don't want to comment.
You want to comment?
Well, I know that technology seems to be redefining relationship,
Really, no doubt about
personal
that.
relationship, and I read somewhere that kids looking at screens all the time is actually changing the processing in the brain, how they process faces, that they cannot really visualize the way people who aren't immersed in that process faces as three-dimensional. They're processing faces as sort of flat, emotionally flat. Now, whether that's true or not, that's what I heard. That's what I read. It certainly is taking social skills down the tubes, from what I can see, in a personal sense.
Yeah.
And actually churning things up in other regards. So
it gives new meaning to the consultant joke.
on the other hand, it's a powerful teaching tool and distribution of ideas tool. So it's a double-edged sword, it seems to me. But I think it seems to me that the personal aspects are being overlooked quite significantly. People are actually starting to disengage from it in some limited way.
Well, interestingly, since we're one day post-Super Bowl, it might interest you to know that people seem to be disengaging from the NFL also. Okay, in other words, I read in the last couple of days an article that said the NFL is losing followers, apparently because it isn't communicating what people expect. Now, I watched the Super Bowl yesterday, and I haven't followed the changes in the rules in the NFL. Have you done so? Okay, but there was only one sack yesterday in the Super Bowl, one. And so there was no blood. And I didn't have the impression it was because it was the old Chicago Bears stuff. They just weren't going for the quarterback as far as I could see. And so maybe as animals we want to see that, that gladiator thing. We want to see blood. I mean, Dr. Jung said, blood is the glue that holds us together in some way. That's a whole different topic. I mean, there's a whole book called, which was a post-Redbook book by Sonu, Shamdasani, and James Hillman, in which they talked extensively about the blood in the Redbook, and that's a different topic, a topic different for today. Yeah.
I think what might be happening to football too, Skip, is that it's losing its mythic element among the young people. The young people want to see fantasy characters and superheroes. Their mindset is that way. It's not in sports heroes anymore.
Well, interestingly, Dr. Woodcock's response to me, which let me refer back to it, but he made this statement to me somewhere here. I don't have it right handy. But he made this statement to me that we're losing the ability of imagination, and yet there's certainly imagination around superheroes and things like that, which are presented to us in the movies, okay, which are all hypnotic, okay? We're all hypnotized by television or the movies or the NFL, whatever it is. It's not life, it's somebody else's life, but we're imagining it somehow. Like the people of Philadelphia think that they somehow did something personally because the Eagles won the game. Well, okay, I feel that to a certain extent. My grandparents were all Philadelphians, and I used to have a football helmet when I was in the 7th and 8th grade. There was a Eagles football helmet. No kidding.
I like their graphics.
Right, and so I had an Eagles football helmet. So somehow, even though I'm married to a New England woman and I have a daughter who's a New England woman, lives near Boston, I feel somehow personally vindicated by the fact that Philadelphia won the Super Bowl yesterday. I can't explain it, but nonetheless, that's within me.
Tribal, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's tribal. Okay, but what I'm driving at is Dr. Jung's fundamental teaching from Aion, okay, which is what he's saying is that our egos are not driving humanity, okay? Something else is driving humanity, okay? In Dr. Woodcock's term, it's alien, some other, some God image, whatever you wish to call it.
Technology.
It's not technology, Bill. Technology is only a tool.
That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong.
Okay, so tell me why it's wrong.
It's not a tool. It's a screwdriver. It's a
That's a tool. A
yeah,
screwdriver is a tool.
and you're equating the electronic computers and all of this technology with a screwdriver.
Yes.
Well, I disagree entirely.
Why?
Because
Okay, tell me why then.
A screwdriver has the same effect and in a very limited way, but this other technology is so all encompassing and so immersive. You don't see a kid sitting around playing with a screwdriver for 12 hours a day.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay, look. When I was 2 years old, no, wait a minute.
Maybe we need to talk to your therapist.
When I was 2 years old, I lived in this group of apartments. Okay. Now, wait a minute. Just hear me, because this is about tools, right? I lived in this square of apartments. We had a little courtyard between the four buildings. And there was anyway, I played with a 2-year-old boy named Michael Todd. Okay. So Michael Todd, his mother read a book that said, at the age of 2, a boy child should have a hammer. Okay, so at the age of 2, she gave her son a hammer. So Michael Todd comes out to play with Skip, and he starts pounding Skip on the head with the hammer. You can still find find the scars. Okay. And there was a Navy commander who was a great big guy, and his name was Tiny Barnes. And he was shaving when this was happening, but he was in his skivvies. And so his wife screams at him, "Tiny, Tiny, Michael's killing Skipper with a hammer." Tiny goes running out in the courtyard in his skivvies, takes the hammer away from Michael Todd, and runs back in his house, leaving Skip bleeding in the courtyard. Scars are still here. Okay, but that's still a tool. That's a tool. Okay, and
I'm sorry. There's volumes of literature that would disagree with you. I don't even want to go into it. I would just say, just the fact that it is so immersive. I mean, the screwdriver. How many metaphors you're going to get out of that? How much language change is going to come from a screwdriver?
Okay,
and you live inside your language.
Just the symbolic content of the particular technology.
And the whole.
yeah, I mean, look, I agree with that. I mean, I agree that my life has been changed by the internet, no doubt. I mean, my
television,
wife,
radio, electricity in your house,
all those
running
things
water.
change life.
I mean,
yeah, sure.
yeah. I mean, it's better than wearing a bear skin and out squatting over a stream.
And so, how did that change us psychically, though? I mean, those are all tools.
That's so big. I can't. I
Those
don't
are
know.
all
That's like
too-
saying, "What's the meaning of life?" That's just too
No,
big.
it's not.
I can't answer it. I'm not equipped to answer that at the moment. That's
All right, well, think about it for next week.
no. I don't want it. It's too big. It's
Okay.
not. It's outside my purview. I don't want to be involved with that.
All right, fair enough.
If I've already studied that, and I'll leave it up to you to figure it out on your own.
Okay, John, do you want to think about it for next week?
If it's too big for Bill, it's too big for me.
Okay, well, I guess
I'll bring you a book to read next week. How about that?
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah.
I'll need something to read next week.
You know, I mean, just even the idea that the idea we went from, you know, Brunelleschi with perspective and changing the way we handled pictorial space, leading to things like graphics and so forth. All these different ways of being able to think and understand what's going on around us. It's just phenomenal. I mean, that is so huge. How can you reduce that to much of anything if you don't understand that even a screwdriver changes the way you think? Prior to a screwdriver, you only had nails. So you had a hammer and a nail, bang, 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 bang. Suddenly you got a screw and a screwdriver, and you go, whoa, I can easily undo what I just did, you know, so that changes the way you think about how you approach a project.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't change the way I think. Indeed, I'm acknowledging that it does change the way we think. Okay, obviously the advent of the commercial internet, especially after the year 2000, but going back all the way to well before that, because
Univac.
well, no, my wife and I met online in 1985, okay, and we say, and nobody's ever disputed me, that we're among the first 5 couples, maybe the first couple, to literally meet online and marry, okay. We met online on August 22nd, 1985. Does anybody out there know anybody that met online before, I'm sorry, it was August 22nd, 1985. Does anybody out there know anyone that met online and subsequently married before August 22nd, 1985? I'd like to know that. We have said that we are. And so, yes, these things do change our lives. There's no doubt about that. Okay. But saying that has anything to do with the quote-unquote telos, the objective of the spirit, is quite a different thing, I think. Okay, all right, we'll discontinue this.
Well, I simply disagree, and I mean, maybe we need to talk about what spirit is, and that'll be a topic for next.